Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back for another review of the AEW All Access series on TBS. That episode is available now. New episodes are available weekly after AEW Dynamite goes off air. Immediately follows it on TBS, as I mentioned. And we're getting into episode 3, which is titled Full Gear, all about Full Gear, and all the things that led up to it. As you know, with All Access, they try to pull back the curtains to try to give us, the fans, a perspective of a day in these wrestlers' lives. And obviously, because this is Full Gear, the events that led up to one of AEW's yearly pay-per-views. We both attended Full Gears before. We attended plenty of AEW pay-per-views, but this was definitely a big one. But funny enough, I'm gonna make a comment about it later. About this pay-per-view, something I didn't realize, but nonetheless, Jamal and I here to talk and break all this episode down. So now that we're 3 episodes in, sir, what's sort of your thought about the series, and then what's your thoughts about tonight's episode? Then we'll get into some of the specifics of tonight.
Well, I thought the third episode was interesting for me personally because I was at Full Gear back in November in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
I think this episode, the Sammy Guevara PR hype train continues to march along. The Britt Baker, PR hype train continues to march along. I think the thing that's interesting is when you think about what Full Gear was, and my feelings about it in the moment. It was interesting to see how I felt, juxtaposed with what we just saw on All Access Part 3. And I think for me, the biggest thing is that I left early because I didn't care about the main event. So seeing the footage for the first time of how the show ended, it's like, oh, so that's what happened, because I was at McDonald's already. But also it is interesting, hearing certain things happen in the way they go down, and then knowing what the history is after that. I think that's probably the most fun about the show, is seeing these things encapsulated, some 6 months ago, and then knowing that, well, if you thought it was bad then, or conversely, hey, things actually got better for you. So it's kind of like a little portal into the near past, and getting able to see what those thoughts are. And to be fair, it's more of the contrived, hey, we're going to go to a normally busy establishment that's packed to the gills of people, except for the one night that we're there where we're the only two in the bar. And then we're going to have a very candid conversation. Oh, didn't see you there, camera, crew, and creative equipment. So yes, I wish that were a little bit more better, more cleverly designed, but it is what it is, and that's the show. Yeah. I mean, it's Hard Knocks. It's not Total Divas. And
producers of these reality shows, they don't try to change the blueprint. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing that you've seen. 90 Day Fiance. The Real Housewives of Chattanooga, or wherever the hell it is this week. It's the same gimmick, where it's like, we're the busiest mall in America, except for the day we're the only two people here. Yeah. And we're going to have a candid conversation that we certainly would not have had if the cameras weren't right here.
And to that point, though, I'm done nitpicking about what the show is going to be, because now it's in full-blown reality show. It's not unique at all to anything we haven't seen before. And the descriptions and the similarities to all the other shows it's exactly that. So if this is the first episode that you're picking up, they hyped it up to be, the new extra bit of content that AEW was doing. But honestly, it's kind of crazy to say this, but being the elite is even more unique with a lower budget, a lower production than this. And you would think that possibly they would do something different, but I guess we're in the reality of if it's not broke, why fix it? And yeah. Sad enough, these reality shows continue to bring in cash. It's easy. It's less of a debt to them as it is more of an income. So, why not just do it? And so for me, now that in the third episode, my expectations of this being anything that we haven't seen before is completely out the window. So with that being said, going into this episode, I was just kind of curious about, what would I find out new Who would it focus on? I read the synopsis, and the synopsis, as we already know for 3 episodes now, in this one focuses on the Bucks' long-awaited return and their concerns about their legacy. Britt Baker and her big match with Saraya, who had the near career-ending, as they said, near-death injury, and then Sammy Guevara looks to continue to prove himself in the ring, and his wife Tay Melo trying to figure out how she can also join the ride and also establish herself. So with that being said, we have now continued to focus on the same groupings of wrestlers and the same narratives with all of them, with the Young Bucks, and I give it to them, with them having imposter syndrome and whatnot, which is not something you hear too much from folks who have established platforms or fandoms, or popularity and whatnot. But why I want to be sensitive to that statement at the same time too. I mean, listen, there's still a big question mark as to what are you all so worried about? You were injured and you relinquished your titles, as far as it seems, or suspended. Yeah. You were suspended, injured, or something, because as far as we know, we don't know what, but we can only speculate that it was that. And like I'm just playing devil's advocate, but like there's such a huge concern as to what you so worried about your legacy. I'm now if you're just a uncasual fan, you start thinking like, yo, did they come out and say like something homophobic, or like, the cancel culture come get them, and somehow, some way they're trying to weasel themselves back in. Listen, this isn't Joey Ryan's claim back to into the wrestling world. These are a group of individuals who got in a backstage fight, who are sitting. Is sitting board members the correct?
Well, they're not on a board because the company's not public, but they are executive vice presidents.
Yeah. So and now they're sitting here worried about their legacy. First of all, the Young Bucks are always going to have a legacy. Will always be considered pioneers within the wrestling world. But I just think the way how they're building this drama up about them worrying about what it's going to be like for them to get back in the ring, and will they be accepted, I think it's just, at this point, there's way too much focus on this series, because it's really not big of a deal. And I honestly would love to hear somebody tell me emotionally how they're connecting with this, that is on the contrary of my thoughts, because it doesn't, there's nothing for me to feel or to understand why they could ever be worried about them and their legacy being tarnished because of something that happened backstage that led to a suspension, that they're back in the title picture, that they're now champions at that, and they still have but they still have titles within the company. This would be totally different if they were stripped from the company, removed from the company, back on the outside on the independents, and somehow, some way they went through some type of program in order to, get them reinstated, they get rehired, and then they work their way back up. This definitely wasn't that.
Well, I think what it will be interesting is immediately after that, we had the best of 7 series between the Lucha Brothers and the Bucks, and that went on for a month and a half. That went on to into January, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the New Year's show was like in Seattle, and then they went back to Los Angeles in like the end of mid-January.
And that's what they want at home.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see if they cover kind of like the justification for this thing, because I was at Full Gear. That match was not announced as match number 1 in a best of 7 series. People were rightly, if you were a fan of the of the returning Elite, people were rightly, beside themselves with a bit of anger and kind of mystified. Damn, they came back and lost. And then, of course, 3 days later on Dynamite, best of 7 series over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Oops. It'll be interesting to see if they kind of cover the justification for that.
Okay.
Or it'll be interesting to see if they cover not necessarily the justification for it, but like why they decided to go back retroactively and say like, oh, this is what we're going to do now. I really hope that they cover that, because that was a big head scratcher in the moment, 4 months ago, as we were looking towards the end of the year. But now the thing is, and we saw the big thing where Tay Melo is like, I love my husband, but I'm frustrated that I'm not able to do these things, and they kind of forgot about me. And it is interesting to see that Britt has kind of risen to be this brand ambassador for the women. It is interesting to see that she's kind of
arguably, but go ahead.
Well, she is. I mean, because she's the one on this show is doing the heavy lifting as far as speaking for the women's division.
Okay, so a couple of comments I have with this here. First off is to the initial point in talking about the Bucks and what transpired from that. Tony Khan, I would like to see a little bit more of him. I would love for them to tap his brain a little bit, and I would love for them to explore some of the things that you're talking about here. We're only getting Tony Khan in Gorilla, which folks is basically backstage watching the monitors and also should I say managing the matches and whatnot. And the only thing we're getting from him every other scene is him saying, "This is great. This is great." Like we're not getting any bit of emotion.
It's great. Everything's on time. Nothing ever failed. It's all good.
And we know it's not like that. And honestly, I would even like to see his reaction to something that isn't great, because at this point now, Tony Khan might as well be a cameo on this. And that's not giving me the all access feeling. And it doesn't feel like I'm being, and I know they made it seem like they were focusing on the wrestling, but how could you not have him involved as well in a capacity that really makes it seem exclusive, if you ask me? But to your point, really quickly about Britt Baker. Britt Baker has assumed that position of being the locker room leader. Sure. Tony Schiavone made it very clear that you don't speak for everybody. He's made it very clear that Britt, you are the one that has an issue. And she keeps coming back to this idea of saying, well, all of us are kind of feeling. She spoke up for Toni Storm, who I would sort of have the feeling of saying that Toni Storm probably wouldn't speak up for herself. So I will give her that. But I don't think that she is justified in speaking for everybody backstage. This to me is interesting just because of things and people we know that I bet you this has been a norm for a long time of Britt Baker speaking up as the consensus.
I know I'm not going to let you do it. Damn it, I'm not going to let you do it. And because what he's trying to do is these are all rumors and speculation.
Yep. And I think she's exposing it. Like, if you don't know anything about wrestling, it's almost like the teacher Pat, who has so much influence on the teacher that they can decide what happens for every bit of their classmate. They become that pseudo representation for everybody who truly don't represent
best for business.
Yeah, and that's exactly what everybody's not saying.
well, let me ask you this then. So the original point that I made about Tay Conti about being frustrated, being kind of left out in the cold, sitting in the wind, where she's at this rudderless ship, circling in a lake, and there are so many other women at the time, and even still currently, that we say are doing the exact same thing, and yet they're not even on the show. So I still have a milk carton looking out for Serena Deeb right now, and there are people that are injured, and yes, they won't be back for a while. But then there are other people that have fallen into the shadow realm, and you wonder, where did they go? Can we leave out a light for Kiera Hogan, for Diamante, for Red Velvet, for Tay Conti, for Penelope Ford, for the Bunny? Where did she go? Is she on the moon? Can we check Narnia? Do we have anybody in Narnia that could find? Because they're gone. They're physically gone. They've evaporated like milk. And I wonder, since this is the case, and they kind of seem to be focusing on, the plight of the Guevaras and the plight of Britt Baker and the people that revolve around them, I wonder why, at this point, Jade isn't in the mix. I wonder why, at this point, Athena isn't in the mix. Because as we remember, back in October, because I was at the Toronto show, Athena was trying to get over this gimmick that really wasn't working well. She was kind of just spinning in the mud. And then she had a match on, I want to say dark. And for all the people that say they don't watch Dark, people sure reacted to it, where people thought that Athena was taking liberties with Jody Threat, which, nah, that just wasn't the case. It was a good match. It was a stiff match, and both women bust their asses. The point is that led to Athena's heel persona now that she's been riding all the way to the bank, all the way to the next pay-per-view, which is going to be All Out. And that was some months ago. So there are other storylines that we've noted on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast that have come through that we're really not seeing on the show. And I wonder who gets to be included in these conversations when it comes to following the show, because there's some definite things that we have noticed, dirt sheets aside, but there's some things that we've noticed that really aren't being talked about that they could have talked about at that time. And I wonder if subjects are too sensitive. That they're gonna all right, we can't run with that. We just can't do it.
The thing is, what I realized with this show, and I really didn't want to have this conversation, is that in the promotion of this show, All Access is very much limited to the wrestlers that they name. However, I thought they were naming people that we would see. You would throw out some of the big names there, but it would not exclude the entire roster. So to me, I get it. I get what you're saying, but now I think by this third episode, I realized, listen, if they were not in that original synopsis and long line, they're not in this. That's just what it is.
I can understand not wanting to cover 15 different stories and getting people confused that only casually watch and stuff like that. From a narrative perspective, it could be a bit of a hassle.
But this episode is titled Full Gear.
Right. And then there were a lot of moving parts that they try to compartmentalize into 3 main stories. And I wonder, at certain points, bigger things are going to happen as we move from November in through December and into January. And I wonder if they're going to actually change gears a bit. And also, more importantly, when are they going to end? When does the show, finish? Yeah. I mean, how many episodes are there? So I'm intrigued.
I'm not expecting much. I'll say that I'm not expecting much. And at this point now, I think we're just getting extra content, and you just kind of go with the ride. But I will say in this, I will say in this episode, the biggest things I got from this is that Tony Schiavone, who we all know is best friends with Britt Baker, who we have either seen in public spaces, conventions and whatnot, who have very much shared that they're best friends on social media and whatnot. Sure. And we got to see a glimpse of what that friendship looks like. And Tony Schiavone, who is a veteran, who is a legend in the wrestling world, is not somebody you can just walk over. He very much held Britt Baker to be accountable for what she's saying, but also at the same time not let her get away with her princess / bratty ways in terms
of the anti-Baker agenda again, popping up.
It is what it is, man. I mean, she gets up there and she starts to speak for the consensus of the locker room.
She's the voice of the voiceless.
And then that's not true, because we know plenty of other folks to say that she says what's best for her, which means that she would throw anybody under the bus who ain't part of her narrative. And as we seen in the first episode, she had no problems in saying, oh, the new kids in the school, come hang out with me. I'm the popular one. And starts to feed them this whole we don't like Thunder Rosa. And then on top of that, you never ever hear any concern about Thunder Rosa's the severity of the concern or the severity of her injury. And it's not to say she doesn't have empathy, because, well, she cares about Saraya's injury. She cares about her likelihood. But Thunder Rosa, she's like, nah, she work here. This is where she gets her check. She needs to show up. Don't care about nothing else. To me, come on now.
We can talk about that ad nauseum. Because the simple truth is that Saraya showed up for work in New Jersey and Rosa hasn't been seen since. And now she's barely doing Spanish commentary. But I digress. I mean, you tell me what Britt Baker told a lie. And I'll sell you some oceanfront property in Arizona. But I think, though, that no matter what, though, I think this is the thing about the show that I'm interested in the most, is whether or not they will kind of address some of the other things that are going to be going on as we move into the dead of winter around New Year's. They're going to be going to Seattle for the first time. That happened in January. The big West Coast swing that happened in January. The best of 7 series with the Bucks and the Death Triangle, happened over, the 8 weeks after that. So I think the big thing is how will they keep these 3 or 4 narratives going? And it is kind of interesting because honestly, Tay Conti's frustrated and she really hasn't been doing much. Okay, cool. We don't need to hear from her until now because she hasn't done much since.
Yeah.
Sammy Guevara, who's been kind of on the cusp and he knows that everybody hates him. Well, we don't really need to hear from him because that's still true today. So it's interesting to see if they will drop some narratives, pick up some new ones. I would definitely like to see some different faces being thrown into the mix. I would love to see Jade's involvement, especially
that ain't happening.
Oh well, okay. Well, I mean,
That ain't happening.
But it should though.
And like it's wishful thinking. You can put that on your Santa Claus Christmas list, but we know this is what the show is going to be. It's going to continue to be the Bucks as they use this as a PR move.
Oh no, it's totally the PR machine.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the Bucks, it's Sammy, it's Britt Baker,
and the only person I care about is Tay Melo, who I never cared about. So good job on them making us care about people. I ain't gonna say because that you may care about somebody else, but I know for me, good job on making us care about something. And I also will say, the PR machine is kind of working for Sammy. Kind of seeing them behind the scene.
What? I can't say that it's not.
Yeah.
For both of them, because honestly, they and whether it's hindsight or not, and this I have to assume that this was taped in the moment some months ago. But to be fair, in this episode, they are saying the things that we said out loud, almost word for word of the show.
Yeah, and I think that for them to have reservations about them showing their relationship on screen as a level of like authenticity and transparency, to them sitting back wondering if that was a good decision is a really bad cloud over the business. Not AEW, but over the business. Where, and I know couples. We know couples in the business, and I have some that are really close friends that says like, man, the fact that we try to be a unit, they do everything in their possible sight to break us up. No one wants to book us together. No one wants us to be in love and not to be messy. Folks want the business to always be this Old Testament way of how things are being done. So I kind of like feel for them in terms of them saying like, hey, listen, like we're in love, we're married. They're doing it all the right way. And Melo's like, I had momentum. It's all gone, but I still support you and I want you to do good. And Sammy's like, yeah, I want to do good. I'm getting opportunities, but I feel for my wife because why should her dreams have to be put aside? Because
it doesn't have to be one or the other.
It should not have to be that way. And I'm thinking here with like anime eyes with X's and question marks, like, why is that a thing? And I'm thoroughly confused. If you hot, you're hot. And then they made a very atrocious statement, which is not true, which is why I appreciate them being a focal point in this because they're young in the business. But they did say you say you don't see 2 people up top. It's always one person and one person below. Well, that's not true. Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch have done it.
Oh no. Okay. Well, to be fair, when they tried to do an angle together as a couple,
they still were up top. They still were on. They still had stuff going. It wasn't like
right. No, Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch independently have things. When they tried to be Seth Rollins Lynch, no. It died a painful death. When Mike Bennett and Maria Kanellis did a thing together,
that was pretty cool.
It was the greatest love that I've ever known, but it died a painful death. Yeah. So I'm not saying that they're wholly wrong, but there are definitely some examples. It doesn't really matter who you are.
Yeah. Because you can look at Beth Phoenix and the Edge. I mean, that's a couple that both had significant programming at the same time. While it was an Edge story, Beth still got to do her thing, came off commentary to have a match to be involved in it and get a big spotlight. Tay is nothing but a manager, and even that she doesn't even come out all the time. So I feel her, but I don't want to say this.
That's also the thing too. She went from a kick-ass Brazilian judoka to management in a group that already has a woman doing that thing in Anna Jay. So she really felt not a part of the Jericho Appreciation Society. She felt like a third wheel. She kind of, is receiving a lot of the backlash and undue backlash from Sammy's transgressions. And it's kind of like torpedoed her career. And she's absolutely right. It's not her fault. She knows that she can do better, but they won't give her a chance. Why is that? And that's a question that we've been asking, not just about her. We have a list of people that we've been saying that for. And that's not just in AEW, just across wrestling in general.
Well, I can
why
tell
not them? Why not now?
I can tell you why in AEW, and it's a common denominator, but that is going to be all the time I have today.
Well, there's that.
Anything else you want to add about this episode, man?
I think the show, episode 3, definitely gives you more of the same, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I definitely want to see how it goes going forward, knowing what the history is. It'll be interesting to see how they cover that. And I really hope that I'm willing to be surprised that they actually bring some more people in, because the real thing is, if you feel bad for Tay Conti, and you should, and because it sucks, then there's a number of people behind her that didn't even get to her spot that you just feel terrible for. So, I mean, like, the biggest thing, I would love to see Jade on the program because of the similar deals that they had to deal with, and she's a champion. So,
shout out to Full Gear for having 3 women's matches on the pay-per-view. As Britt said, this is one of the first time ever. Oh, I forgot to even mention the thing I was going to say, which shouldn't be the case because AEW women's roster is loaded. So it was surprising to hear her say that. But you know what else was surprising? I have not seen that Saraya and Britt Baker match. I don't know how I missed it. Watching,
I was there. It was easy to miss.
Yeah, watching the highlights, I was just like, oh, I hate how they booked this match. Like, she's playing up the injury like this. Like,
yeah, you can kind of see on Khan's face where he wasn't really sure what he was looking at.
Yes,
and that kind of brought back a lot of just a flood of memories where it was like, yeah, that's how I look too. And that's another thing about the show. We were in the same building, Tony Khan and I. We watched the same match in real time, and we both had the same look on our faces going, huh.
One had the ability to do something about it, one didn't.
Well, there's that.
Anyway, folks, let us know your thoughts about episode 3 of season 1 of AEW All Access title Full Gear. Get in the comments, let us know thoughts about it. And as always, folks, join us each and every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast, which is live on all of your social medias. But until then, we'll see you back for more reviews here at Big Gold Belt Media. Thank you for watching this.